Christy Shriver, and we're here to discuss books that have changed the world and have changed us.
And I'm Gary Shriver, and this is the How to Love Lit podcast. Ironically, for a man who traveled so little, Tolkien is famous for his travel quotes, and one of his most famous, and one that you see on a lot of travel posters, comes from The Lord of the Rings and was given to Bilbo. He says in a poem about Aragorn, "Not all those who wander are lost."
And isn't that true? This week, Anna, who you may have seen on our Instagram or Facebook promo, is in Greece just doing that, wandering. She's on buses and Vespas and boats. And so in honor of Tolkien, the man who inspired quite a bit of wanderlust over the years, we've invited a special guest to take us on our own little adventure. Jack Baumann, otherwise known as the Guidester. Jack started a company in 2014 to do just what Anna is doing, explore the world. So today we asked him to join us for a special travel episode inspired by the sights and sounds of the UK, the world of Tolkien.
Jack, thanks for being with us today. And for starters, from one Missourian to another, welcome to the podcast. I'm from the Kansas City side. So we're happy that you're here. And this is the first time we have ever interviewed anyone on the show. So
I'm honored. Thank you.
You're the guinea pig.
Well, thank you for having me. I am honored to be here. Thank you. I think your podcast is great.
Thanks. And well, unlike Christy, I didn't travel growing up. So all the exploring I ever did was through books and movies and music. And however, reading and exploring really obviously go hand in hand. And they're both fueled by a passion to see other worlds and get to know other people and understand new ideas. So tell us briefly a little bit about your journey and what it is that you do now for a living. I mean, you have a very unique approach to enable people to see the world.
Right. Well, thank you for that. I am trying. I guess I would start with what got me on this journey is I left the United States, left St. Louis, my hometown, after I did my undergrad at Mizzou, left Missouri and went to Cardiff, Wales to get my master's in archaeology. And that's where the genesis of Guidester sort of took root. I went over there by myself. This was not an exchange program. So there wasn't a sort of safety net of other Americans. Very few Americans go to Wales, actually. They go to England, they go to Scotland. Obviously, they're going to Ireland, other places in Europe. But Wales is probably pretty far down the list as far as Americans traveling there, which was good for me because I was one of like 3 Americans in the whole city of Cardiff that were living there. And so we stood out. I was very much different. And there was no exchange program. So I was forced to really make friends and meet people. And it was the time of my life. I lived just, a few blocks from the university, a few blocks from the train station. I traveled all over Europe. And while I was doing that, I decided that a better travel tool was needed. And in essence, it's really simple. It's a custom personalized travel guide. So a travel book or a travel guide that, first of all, downloads to your phone. So you're not looking through internet stuff and you're not carrying bulky books around. So easy to use and personalized to your own interests. So you know what to see in London that's going to interest you because you pick up Rick Steves' London. Rick Steves doesn't know who Gary is, has no idea who Christy is. And so 90%, maybe 50 to 90% of that information in that book is going to be useless to you because it's not pertinent to your own interest. I was made aware of this while I was traveling around Europe, and it came poignantly abundant to me. And when I was in Rome, I've been to Rome. I'm going in September. This will be my 7th trip to Rome. I love it. Amo a Roma. It's la bella vita. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's bellissima. But I was talking to this American couple and I asked them how they liked their trip. I just ran into people. You do see Americans, obviously, in Rome. It's popular for tourists there. And, hated it. Like, I got to say, my humble opinion, if you hate Rome, now they were frustrated. When I asked them why they hated it, what I realized is they did the things that everybody else does. When I asked them what they did the Vatican, they did the Colosseum. And admittedly, they said, well, the Vatican's beautiful and the Colosseum's neat and so on and so forth. But they were tired. They were hot. They were they were unfulfilled. And when I asked them what they did and what they normally do, they didn't jive. These are foodies. These are relaxed. They were younger, so they liked entertainment. And other than food, you're going to get good food in Rome, regardless. But other than that, they just didn't do anything they normally do. And it's because Rick Steves says, you got to go to these 10 spots. You got to go to these 15 spots, or if you haven't seen Rome. Now, again, admittedly, you're going to see the Vatican. You got to see the Colosseum and the Forum. But that's one day, maybe even a half a day if you do it back to back. There's so many other things to see, and there's nature, and there's rooftop bars, and there's underground wine cellars, and there's little museums that are, in churches. Even if you're not into churches, there's beautiful unknown churches and small fountains, and just cool neighborhoods, and the Via Appia Antica, one of the oldest roads in Rome. So that's kind of what we started on the journey.
Well, Jack, for people who have been locked up for a year in a pandemic, you're starting to make me salivate. I mean, just thinking about all this kind of thing. Let's talk about the UK. We have a lot of UK listeners, and I know even if you live in the UK, can they use? I mean, what do you know? Where is your experience? You said everywhere exploring the UK. Talk to us specifically about the United Kingdom or Tolkien's backyard.
Sure. So first, let's set it up. The UK is somewhat of a catch-all term that people use to describe England. So just so we're on the same page, Britain is England, Scotland, and Wales. When you add in Northern Ireland, now you've got the UK. Now, technically, the UK includes Gibraltar, the Isles of Scilly, and other things. But the UK is Britain, England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So when we're talking UK, we're also talking Northern Ireland. My experience, now I've done Ireland, but my real deep experience is Britain. So that's England, Scotland, and Wales.
Gotcha.
I have done Land's End, which is in the southwest tip of Cornwall. So the very furthest south you can go in England, all the way north to John O'Groats, which is in the far north of Scotland. Literally, you can't go any further without jumping in the sea, and everywhere in between. So London, Liverpool, York, literally most major cities, medium cities, countryside. I've done a lot of Britain, and I truly love it. So it's a small island that packs a heck of a punch. It really does. Doesn't matter what you're into. It has it all.
Jack, thanks for clarifying the difference between Britain and the UK. That's glossed over a lot.
It is, right.
States, yeah.
So Britain, I could talk all day about Britain. So to be respectful to your listeners, we can do some targeted discussions and related to Tolkien, right? Because I could really talk all day about Britain. Right. So you better not get me started.
Well, obviously, most of our readers have never been to Britain, but they do enjoy literary traditions from there. I mean, we've looked at various authors. We looked at Shakespeare and T.S. Eliot and Jane Austen and now Tolkien. And here's our question for you, Jack. If you are a classical book nerd and have just finished reading Tolkien's The Hobbit, like we just have, give us some fun ideas of places to explore.
Sure. So let's do this in two parts. Let's do the Tolkien's personal history. So places and things you can do that are directly related to the life of Tolkien. And then we also need to do a separate little piece on things that are inspirational to Tolkien and the scene in Middle-earth, either directly or indirectly, because there's certainly some places in the UK and Ireland that directly inspired Tolkien's worlds and landscapes and people, but then there's also things where you can just get a great sense of it. So I'll start with the first, which is personal history of Tolkien. Where should you go? Oxford itself is the best place to start. Tolkien lived in Oxford for 50 years, studying, teaching, researching, and of course, writing. It was in Oxford that he penned the famous novels. And pilgrims will find there's actually a blue plaque signifying the importance of 20 Northmoor Road in North Oxford, where Tolkien penned and wrote his famous Lord of the Rings novels. So 20 Northmoor Road It's just a private residence, but you can go and see it. But the city of Oxford itself is very, very cool. Then you'll move on to Oxford University, in particular, Merton College. Now, one clarification, too, that does throw people is Oxford University is a conglomeration of many universities, or many colleges, I should say. So Tolkien studied at Merton College, which is part of Oxford University, one of the most prestigious, actually. And he was a professor of English language and literature. He was there, I believe, for 14 years teaching. And as I said, it's one of the oldest colleges in the UK, founded in the 12th century, like 1240 or 1260, just blows my mind. So you're talking almost 800 years that's been there. It has one of the oldest working libraries in the UK, which is a place where Tolkien would have spent a lot of his time reading and studying. So going to Oxford, seeing Merton College and seeing the library and just being immersed in that, got to do it.
How far away is that from London?
Oxford's only about an hour and a half or less to Oxford, London, Oxford, and there's a train that goes right in there. One of the things I love about the UK, or Britain in particular, is you can basically get from place to place, even wee villages, via train. The train system in Britain is very good, unlike other countries. This is not a blanket statement. Europe is not one thing, as a lot of people reduce it to. Trains in Italy, not so easy, especially Rome. But trains in Britain, timely, clean, cheap, or at least affordable. So if you want to go to Oxford, take a train right from Victoria Station in London, take you right in the heart of Oxford. Step off and you'll be a couple blocks away from Oxford University. So also in Oxford, Tolkien's resting place. You can pay respects to the great man himself. He's buried in a cemetery called Wolvercote in the North Oxford suburb of Wolvercote. So a lot of Tolkien fans go to this cemetery each year and they lay flowers. So it's a cool thing to see if you're a big Tolkien fan. And then, of course, in Oxford is the Eagle and Child. It's a local pub that Tolkien used to frequent, also known as the Bird and Baby, which I didn't know until recently. One of the things what's that?
It's the same place with two names.
It is. Well, when you go to Britain, you realize very quickly that they must have been drunk or something when they named these pubs, because literally they take two names that seemingly have nothing to do with each other. The Eagle and Child. Okay. The Dog and the Duck, a very famous pub in London. The Dog and the Shearer. So it's so funny. That's part of the fun, is these place names and these pub names. Just a lot of times they don't even know where they come from. They'll have 3 or 4 different divergent stories of, how it came to be. So it's a public house, and there's a free house. This is totally irrelevant, but interesting history. There's free houses and public houses. Because when you talk about a pub, that's a public house. And that used to have an admission that was like a gentleman's only club. A free house was exactly what it is. It's a free house for the general public. Now, today, that designation is pretty much null and void. A pub is a pub is a pub. But you'll see free house or public house below the name often. This was a public house. So this would have been more of a gentleman's place. So it would have been more, maybe, let's say, educated. Whereas nowadays, it's a free-for-all on the pub.
So like in his day, would he maybe have had to pay, or that had already gone?
I don't know. Yeah, because you're talking, early 1900s. There's a very good chance that it could have still been a true public house of members. Wow. I believe until, the 1800s, maybe the early 1900s. But certainly after post-World War II, these distinctions somewhat change. But, there's still very much as cultural distinction. I should say a class distinction, actually, that very much exists in British society till this day. Now, today, you can tell it by the accent more than you can socioeconomic class. But the accent will tell you where you're at on the socioeconomic ladder. It's very interesting to see this happen. So anyway, so the Eagle and the Child is a pub that you have to see in Britain. So a couple other little small spots, or not small, but things you should see after you see Oxford is Exeter College, where Tolkien himself attended university, I believe, to a scholarship for classics. He stayed on Broad Street. He was there in 1911, 1913, first class honors. and Exeter College. So it's just a college that you can visit. Exeter is a really cool place to see on in itself. It's in Southwest England. That was actually the second school that I applied to other than Cardiff. So it was Cardiff University and Exeter, but I just felt like Cardiff was the right place for me. But Exeter has a beautiful cathedral, and then you can visit Exeter College. It's a really cool market town, well worth seeing and related to Tolkien.
I was just going to interject. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Listening to you give the address of the house where he wrote Lord of the Rings made it so much more real to me automatically the minute you said that.
Awesome. I'm glad you say that. I wasn't sure how detailed I wanted to be, but that's the name of the game. You need to bring these things to life in a way that people can absorb it and understand it. And I don't claim to speak to everybody, but one of the things that I do in my guides is I digest a lot of information into small chunks, including not just history, but culture. You don't need a giant encyclopedic knowledge of the history of the Roman Empire to understand the significance of the Colosseum and the Forum. And in this case, you don't need to be a Tolkien fan to get the feel of the amazing weight of what he's done there, and just kind of to see his inspiration, which we're going to get to soon. There's some places that he directly saw. So thank you. Yeah, I try to be detailed without getting boring, So other than Oxford, those sites in Oxford, well, we're seeing Exeter College, then Birmingham is directly related to Tolkien. That's where he grew up. Tolkien family is rooted in Birmingham. He was born in South Africa, but they moved he considers himself a Birmingham man, which is in the Midlands of England. So northwest of Oxford. They lived there, and that's where he got a lot of his inspiration. There's some structures and some nature reserves around Birmingham that he got his inspiration as a child that started to really open his mind up to, adventure and thinking and imagining these places. So if we may, I can transition over to those specifics, those physical representation of the world he describes in his books. Unless you guys want to ask any questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So city-wise, history-wise, bottom line is you got to get to Oxford, see, the Genesis, maybe check out his hometown. How far away is Oxford to Birmingham?
Not far. I want to say maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes, could be even less. Close. Birmingham is, So full disclosure, Birmingham is an industrial city. It's not my favorite city. Oxford is pretty. It's just pretty. It's old buildings. It's clean. Birmingham is an industrial city. So you just need to be aware of what you're getting into.
Well, if you know anything about Tolkien, he didn't like it himself. Like he complained.
Right.
So there's no full disclosure. I think that's accepted fact.
Okay, good. Well, you don't know who you might be offending, right? There might be a Birmingham listener and be like, I love my hometown.
Well, up around here, so you can say, I understand it. I still love it. It's the thing, but nothing can be everything. Well, moving on to the mythology of the environment, because that's a whole nother, Tolkien was all about the secondary world and your imagination and the elves and the dwarves and where you imagine them being. Tell us about that. Where are we going to find these elves and dwarves in real world?
Oh man, Britain and Ireland. So I am going to include Ireland in this because there is actually a lot of evidence that so Ireland. Tolkien did travel to the west of Ireland, and he actually, I believe, took his first trip with C.S. Lewis to the west of Ireland. So we're going to discuss Ireland at length after we get through England, because there is no getting around. He lived in England for most of his life, other than some small trips he took. So southern England is really where you're going to get the feel of the Shire and a lot of these other places. So some specifics. In Birmingham, starting where he grew up, it's called Parrott's Folly and Sarehole Mill. So walking to school from his home in Birmingham, Tolkien would pass by the local waterworks and mill, the Parrott's Folly. These are two opposing towers that are old water mills. And it's suggested very, very poignantly that this inspired Tolkien's Two Towers. And when you look up an image of Parrott's Folly and Sarehole Mill, you see it. It's these two old rustic towers that just have this commanding look. And I think it's red sandstone, so you could imagine as a child. Now, it's not on the scale of other towers you might see or things he would have seen later in life. But I would think he walked by this every day. And I would imagine that this played an impact or played a role in his visualization of the two towers and Sauron's, two towers.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's 96 foot high. It's a part of what they call Birmingham's Tolkien Trail. So you can go to Birmingham and follow this little trail that they call Tolkien Trail, which also features a museum now.
Oh, wow.
Then right nearby is Moseley Bog, which is a nature reserve in Birmingham. Also, it's Birmingham. If anybody wants a little bit of linguistic advice, you'll really impress British. Anything that says ham, it's hum. So Birmingham, for example, and then Shire is Shire. So Birminghamshire, Oxfordshire, Cambridgeshire. It's not Shire, it's Shire. So just it will go a long way if you say, "Oh yeah, I'm in Oxfordshire." I'm like, "Oh man, you got the language down."
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and they love to leave out words like Leicester is actually Leicester, and they've left out 3 or 4 letters. So kind of just slurring it together is usually the way to go.
I don't know if you can combine the Southern accent with the British accent to make anything intelligible.
Christy, it's actually hilarious that you say that. So you say British. So I'm going to just tell you a quick story. I was in the Highlands of Scotland. I think I was in Inverness, and there was a Southern gentleman from Mississippi and a very, very Highland accent. I've been to Britain collectively 2+ years between living and traveling. I couldn't understand a single word either of them were saying, but they could understand each other.
That's great.
I'm sitting there, and actually there are similarities. Apparently a lot of Scottish settled in places in the South, maybe particularly Mississippi. I wasn't aware of that at the time. So there is some word use. It's not just the accent, it's word usages.
Yeah.
The Scottish language is just, every third word is English. The 2 other words are, I don't know what, it's a dreek day. If you don't know what dreek means, you're like, okay. Dreek just means wet. So it's a wet day. So anyway, I know we're getting off topic here, but it's funny you mentioned the southern deep accent and the Highland deep accent. And I couldn't understand them hardly, but they could understand each other. And I'm watching them talk to each other and they're just getting along great.
That's a great story.
It makes me laugh every time I am reminded of that experience. So anyway, so moving on. So this big nature reserve, Moseley Bog, absolutely worth seeing. Apparently that's where he would play a lot of games with his brother and friends. And it's a wooded area. So he would get a lot of his playtime in this wooded area. So another place well worth seeing that's going to give you a lot of this visual representation is Cheddar Gorge, which is a limestone gorge near the village of Cheddar in Somerset, which is in southern England, just outside of Bath, so southwest of Oxford. Tolkien later wrote in his life that his trip, which I think was his honeymoon, inspired Helm's Deep and the caverns in the White Mountains. And I've been to Cheddar Gorge, and it really does feel like the ravine leading into Helm's Deep.
What is a gorge exactly?
It's like a ravine, a very rocky ravine. So you can imagine maybe a very narrow valley, rocky, high cliff valley, basically.
Okay. Cool.
Yep. And usually I believe gorges have water running through them. Cheddar Gorge, put it on the list. And then speaking more generally, southern England. So Oxford and south of Oxford. Now, a little cultural insight. You've got a road, a highway called the M4 that goes from London all the way to the west of London to Cardiff. So basically cuts England kind of from the Midlands and the Highland, the northern England to the south. So everything south of the M4 is considered southern England. Now, Oxford is north of that line, but it's still kind of lumped into southern England. So if you talk to an Englishman, they really, the southern English is the wealthiest part of England. It's the best maintained. And a lot of these picturesque villages that we're discussing reside in southern England, which includes Sussex, Somerset, Wiltshire, Cornwall, Devon, Kent. So a lot of these counties, but this is southern England. If you just look at a map, you'll see this highway going across. Everything south of that is what I'm describing. So southern England is where you're going to see places like the Cotswolds. The Cotswolds it's actually Old English for rolling hills, the Cotswolds. It is beautiful. It's thatched houses, small streams, rolling hills, stone walls, quaint cathedrals, and small little churches that have been there for 1,000 years. In particular, a couple I'll mention is Castle Combe, which is a village in the Cotswolds. The newest, Gary and Christy will love this, the newest building in that village is circa 1600. It's newest. So they're not having modern buildings here.
Well, do they put in electricity and plumbing?
Oh, of course. The outfit is all, and that's the cool thing. So another one. So Castle Combe, I think it's Arlington Row, I believe it's called. This is one of the most picturesque photographed streets, not really a street, it's really just a cobblestone road in Castle Combe. One of the most picturesque you'll see when you see travel maps and books and things, you'll see often this photo of Arlington Row and Castle Combe. Got to put that on your itinerary. And then Bibury, which is probably my favorite village. And it really is a village. So Castle Combe has a few houses. Bibury is basically a bridge with 3 or 4 houses and this moss covered, it's called the Swan Hotel. And you can stop there. You can stay there. You stop in for a pint, for a meal, for some afternoon tea and crumpets or a scone. And it's this, it makes sense to me why Tolkien got his inspiration from Southern England, because the Shire, this is where you'll feel the essence of the Shire. It's so civilized. I often joke that the British, the English in particular, are so civil and so civilized, even their rivers obey. Because they really aren't rivers. They're quaint streams. Now, they have a few rivers that are considered rivers, but nothing you could compare to the Mississippi, right, or the Missouri. They're 5-10 foot deep, clear as crystal, moving along at a gentleman's pace. and then to top it off, I mean, it's like the stream itself is, and then it's rich green history, green grass, because they get a lot of moisture. So the greenest green you'll ever see will be in Britain and Ireland. And so to top it off, a 500,000-800,000-year-old stone bridge over this quaint little stream. And then just to add a little cherry on the top, a ivy encrusted stone building along the stream there, just to put that little cherry on the top. And so now you've got this scene that just...
Now you're looking for Bilbo.
Now you're looking for Bilbo. I've looked for him many times, and you'll come across hobbits.
Oh, that's such a great description. I'm really impressed with this kind of information regarding where to go. That is, we've been to London, we've been to Southern England. We didn't see any of the things you're describing right now. So you're taking us off the beaten path into new territories. And man, I hope our listeners are excited listening to that kind of stuff. And so let's say, for instance, some of our book nerds decide they're going to go. Should they make it a point to stay anywhere special? Are there any special inns or anything they should participate in?
While you're thinking on that, let me ask you this question. What about food? What should we eat?
Well, we all know hobbits like to eat. So yeah, I would definitely recommend, on that note, I would recommend getting as many full-on English breakfasts as you can. So this is their bacon's different. The best bacon you've ever had in your life is British, English, Scottish, Welsh, but the English breakfast is what they call it. And this is your bacon, which is more like thinly sliced pork. Then your baked beans, your fried eggs, your sausage, your mushrooms, your black pudding, and your little tomato. So it's this giant smorgasbord of very, very hearty food. And like in Ireland, they actually make a joke. In Ireland, if you want to eat good, you got to eat breakfast 3 times a day.
Well, that's so funny you say that, because I didn't realize in The Hobbit, he's always dreaming about breakfast, and he's dreaming about second breakfast, when he's sad or cold. All he wants to do is think about breakfast, which,
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's why the English breakfast really is a staple of English culture. Tolkien, I guarantee, would have probably had one very frequently, if not every day. I had one almost every day, and it's hearty. You have one, and you're set for the day. You might even have a pint of ale. I know that sounds weird to have ale during breakfast, but breakfast is all day. It is not just breakfast time. So definitely get yourself. It's called a full English breakfast. Now, sadly, you could get this. You used to be able to get this in any major city in England and Britain. For some reason, maybe it's because it's becoming commercialized, but it's becoming harder to find a really good, authentic, full-on English breakfast. Even in London, a lot of every pub 10, 15 years ago, every pub had the full-on English breakfast. Now, most of them don't. So you really do sometimes need to get into the countryside. You need to get into these smaller towns and villages. Any B&B you stay in, any good B&B we're staying in worth their salt will have a full-on English breakfast.
So you think that's the way to go? Do you recommend Airbnb, or do they have their own little organization where you can do that?
Well, I wouldn't actually recommend. I would recommend Airbnb for two reasons, and this is generally Europe in total, not just the UK. If you're going with a family and you need multiple rooms, Airbnb is the way to go. Or if you're on a budget. Now, the budget thing's changing because hotels are causing a stink and they're upset that they're being undercut. So the rules around pricing are changing, but you can still usually get an Airbnb a little cheaper. That being said, personally, I don't think you're getting anything different. I actually think you're losing some authenticity. So when I say B&B, these are traditional booking hotels. So these are not traditional hotels like a Hilton. The Swan Hotel is a great example. Swan Hotel is a B&B, a bed and breakfast in Bibbury in the Cotswolds, but you can't book that on Airbnb. That is it's considered a traditional hotel, but it's not a hotel in the way we think of it. It's a true B&B run by the family, probably for generations, but you do need to book that through their website or through a traditional travel agent like myself. So that's part of what I do is I'm an international travel planner, and I put together the itineraries. I book the hotels, I book flights and activities. So I would help guide through that. But yes, the way that I would go in London, stay in a centrally located hotel, probably in the city of London or in the west of London, near Green Park, Hyde Park, Piccadilly Circus. But then when you get to Oxford or Cotswolds, the rule of thumb is location, location, location. So often, Christy, you'll get pubs that have rooms on the second story. That's what you want to do. You'll stay in the pub, which is, again, it's called a B&B, but it's a pub, restaurant, B&B, all mixed in. And then you stay there, you come down in the morning for breakfast, and they've got a full, they'll ask you, it's not like a Hilton Garden where you've just got your cereal and you've got your buffet line. No, they'll come and they'll ask you, do you either get maybe a choice of white or wheat toast, or you might get some more choices, but typically they're going to expect you to get the full English breakfast. They might have a few other options, but that's their staple. So staying there. Now, anything else iconic to eat? Full-on English breakfast is a must, but I would also not gloss over the pastries, the British pastries. They definitely, just like the Hobbits, they have a sweet tooth, and they do them well. So a couple that I enjoy are apple crumble, cheesecake, carrot cake, bread and butter pudding. These are English staples. And of course, you can't leave Britain without a scone, which is basically, the way that I would describe a scone is a sweetened biscuit. Because there is kind of this debate. What's the difference between a biscuit and a scone? Because it's basically just leavened bread. It's just a bread product. But our biscuits are more like, kind of corn-based, I guess. So a little bit more hearty. Theirs are usually glazed with a sweet. And there's different types of scones. But I would describe a scone as like a sweetened biscuit.
All right. Well, I know we're getting close to the end. But before we do, I do want to ask, is there any special place that we just got to do? Give us your best stuff.
So I did mention the Cotswolds. That is something special. If you can spend a few days in the Cotswolds, rent a car. If you're so adventurous.
Listen,
driving on the it's worth it, Christy. I'm telling you, it's so worth it. Driving on the left side, you'll get used to it in an hour.
You haven't seen Christy's driving.
Oh, is it bad? Well, you could drive, Gary. She could do the map and navigate. Be your navigator. Every good driver needs a good navigator. But really, it allows you, because I mentioned getting around via train, which you can, but usually the Cotswolds these are so remote. So to see some of these really small villages like Bibury, you do need a car or a driver. You can do a private driver for the day or for a couple of days. So basing yourself in the Cotswolds in a place like Bibury or Castle Combe Chittenham, it's in the north. Tetbury is another good one. There's just so many to mention. So finding a wee village, staying there, driving around the Cotswolds. And then if you've never been, it's more of an event. So you got to time it right. It's called Oxenmoot. Have you heard of Oxenmoot?
No, of course not. Never heard of it.
It's run by the Tolkien Society UK. It's held at Oxford College during the week closest to September 22nd, which I believe is Frodo and Bilbo's birthday.
Yes.
So the weekend, it's a celebration, a mix of talks, exhibitions, shows, and a masked ball held in the evening where everyone dresses up as their favorite Lord of the Rings character. So Oxenmoot, just Google that. That's definitely a special thing related to Tolkien in England that you can do.
Wow, that's exciting.
And one other thing I will mention, I'm sorry, I grossly did not mention, only briefly, Ireland. So I got to mention this specifically. In the west of Ireland is a place called the Burren. This is where we think Tolkien got his inspiration for the Misty Mountains and specifically Gollum's Cave. So it's the Burren is an area in County Mayo in the west of Ireland. It's a vast, rocky, craggy, otherworldly terrain. And like I said, there's a cave there, and I can't think of the name off the top of my head. It's Irish, that we believe that he got his inspiration for Gollum's Cave. And I've been to the Burren twice, and I'm telling you, it is you're there. You're in the Hobbit. I mean, wow. It's a vast, craggy, otherworldly kind of landscape. It's just south of Galway. So if you're in the west of Ireland, seeing Galway or the Cliffs of Moher, which is a must see in Ireland, you can squeeze that in. So what they actually in the west of Ireland, it's very sensitive. The Irish, especially this part in the Burren, they contend that Tolkien got all of his inspiration from Ireland. Now, if you read Tolkien's biography, written mostly by English historians, they will conveniently leave that out. But there is a lot of speculation that he got some of his inspiration from Ireland. He did visit this region on numerous occasions, and they still have a festival. I think they just call it the Tolkien Burren Festival every year that celebrates Tolkien in his work. So definitely worth putting in your
that.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Jack, your information is amazing. How could you not have an awesome trip if we followed your tips and saw these places, especially if you're a huge Tolkien fan? So thanks for giving us inspiration and opening our eyes to some of the ways that we can do that in his world. And before we check out, I want you to tell everyone how they can find you on the web, because you've got a great service. What do they need to do to check out some of the adventures that you have planned for upcoming real world trips, and how someone could check into some of these adventures in person or virtually?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to connect with me is on my website and via email. So my website is guidester.com. That's GUIDESTER, guidester.com. And that'll have podcasts. That'll have actually a cool virtual vacation platform where you can cruise around on your own. That will have our articles and blogs. And there's a place there where you can contact me directly. If you want to just browse, guidester.com is the best way to do and go about that. If you want to actually engage me directly and help me build these trips and help you plan your own experience, there is a consultation button on the main table of contents. You just click consultation and you can actually schedule a call with me. And I can go into any kind of planning, from itinerary ideas to the sightseeing tours, to the accommodation. So I can help you from A to Z. I like to say, from your first flight to your last night, Guidester helps you travel right.
Oh,
little jingle there. So you can fill that form out. And I do kind of have two separate services, if you will, and you can use them together or separately. The cool thing about what I do is if you want to book on your own, but you still want to use my knowledge, you can do that. It's just $10 per travel day. So if you're in the UK for 10 days, I'm going to plan out everything to see and do each day according to your interest for $100. Wow. If you want to engage me, to actually use me and book through me and have me plan and book everything for you, that's just a flat fee. So I'm able to do the booking on the one hand, or if you say, you know what, I got this, and you just want the itinerary or the sightseeing guide, the personal travel guide, you can do that on your own. Now, the cool thing is the website is set up to do that for you. You just go to build my guide, fill out the form, you tell me exactly what you want to see and do, and then I will create a guide for you and send it to you via email. It downloads right to your phone. So you can do all of that, use my consultation, or create a travel guide for your own trip online. Now, one thing I will say, the website's all about Europe because I love Europe, but I will do consultations for anywhere in the world. So I do a lot of US, Hawaii, Caribbean. So I just want to throw that out there. If you're thinking, man, I want to use Jack, but I'm not going to Europe anytime soon, you can still do that. So guidester.com is really the best place. And I'm going to schedule a time to have Christy and Gary on my podcast. So you'll want to tune into that because we do have a Guidester virtual vacation podcast to get you enthused about travel in Europe. So be looking out for that. But yeah, that is the best way. And then Jack at guidester.com is a good email as well.
We'll put a link on our website for sure so people can track you down that way too.
Awesome. And I would just like to say that when we were talking with Jack about putting this podcast together, we told him basically, tell us what you can find out about Tolkien and Britain. And if you're not overwhelmed by the stuff he knows, then you don't need to be going.
And you do need to be going because it's so exciting.
Well, if you want a customized planned trip that is like that fits you like a good pair of jeans, it sounds like Guidester is really what you need to do.
Yes. And in this day of COVID, so you could get by, you can find so much online, but now with COVID, certain things are closed. There's different restrictions. So I would encourage anybody that wants to go to Europe, don't be daunted. Europe is actually open now. Most of Europe is opening this summer. I'm going to Italy in September. But don't be daunted. You just need, or I would advise you to have a professional plan it for you because there are extra hoops you have to jump through, and there are going to be things that are closed, and you have to book reservations. Yeah, as opposed to just showing up. So if you have all that done, don't be intimidated. One of the things I love to do is encourage people to step out and just do something they normally wouldn't do. So there's great places to see in our own backyard, but as we've just discussed in the last 30, 40 minutes here, there is a wealth and other world waiting for you out there. And so if you like to escape in literature, you can escape in reality and bridge that gap. And sort of live the experience. And it's not daunting. If you have someone put it together for you and educate you, you can do it.
Well, I would like to quote Bilbo Baggins about this travel stuff, where he says, "It's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out of your door. You step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to." Bilbo told Frodo that, by the way. So anyway, I think it's very interesting.
And Gary, what's interesting about that is too, it's both a warning and a promise.
Yes.
Great.
And he's right. You will encounter challenges. You will encounter differences. But when he says you don't know where you'll be swept off to, that usually translate into something interesting and revealing and fascinating. Even if there's challenges involved in that, you're interested, you're learning something new. And then when you look back on it, you're like, oh my gosh, I got through that and I was able to overcome this challenge. And so it's a beautiful quote because it's both a true warning and a true promise.
Well, Jack, I want to thank you too. And I have a Bilbo quote. So here's Bilbo. Don't adventures ever have an end? I suppose not. Someone else always has to carry on the story. And that's our hope for everybody out there listening. Carry on the story and may the adventures never, ever stop. Thanks, Jack.
Thanks for having me. Had a great time, guys. Thank you.
Right. Peace out, guys.